Thank you, Nabil, for setting the context. We've got a very illustrious panel with us. On my right is Tarun Garg, Chief Operating Officer of Hyundai Motors. He's been in industry for nearly 3 decades, or slightly less than 3 decades now. Almost 3 decades. Mr. Nikunj Sanghi, well, I won't say 3 decades, he's much over 4 decades. He's the MD and CEO, promoter of JS 4 Wheels, but along with that, he wears many, many hats. So let's see which hat unfurls here. Then we have Shashank Srivastava, who's also known as the intellectual giant of the industry. So he's also had about 3 decades of experience with us. And there is, I would say, the young Turk, relatively, among all the youngest, Mr. Balbir Singh Dhillon, who will give us a perspective. He's heading Audi in India, and he'll give us a perspective from the luxury car market. Now, if you look at I don't want to tell the ages of people who are there, but 2 of us are born when Pandit Nehru was the Prime Minister, Mr. Nikunj Sanghi and myself. 2 were born when Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister, Mr. Dhillon and Mr. Tarun Garg. And 1 was born, Shashank, when Lal Bahadur Shastri was the Prime Minister. So I leave it to you to judge way it is.
ये तो सोचा ही नहीं था.
So, they represent different era, but more on that part of it. So, the topic for today, and it's a very interesting topic, and we're talking of the supply chain challenges in the auto retailing. Generally, if you talk of supply chain challenges in the last 2-3 years, the word which comes to everybody's mind is semiconductors. So people thought supply chain challenge was linked to semiconductors. And there was a lot of, it did impact the production to a large extent. Things have got better. But it'll be taking a very narrowistic or minimalistic view of the supply chain challenge if we just think of supply as far as semiconductor is concerned. Actually, the supply chain challenges, whether it's a seller's market, whether it's a buyer market, has become much more complex. Look at the complexities which have got added in the industry. All our vehicles used to be mechanical vehicles. That's why we were all basically mechanical engineers. Then came some part of electronics, then mechatronics, electronics, and then came software. So along with mechanical, electrical, electronics, software has got into it. So vehicle is riding on 4 dimensions as far as is concerned. Then you talked of fuel, petrol and diesel. Now we talk of LCNG, we talk of LPG, we talk of EV, we talk of hybrid, and now we're talking of hydrogen. So it's like more of a rainbow phenomena, big Bior. 7 colors of the rainbow, 7 type of fuels. Different fuels for different vehicles, but that's the complexity. Then we also have vehicles which will cater to different in terms of engine sizes. In the same, most companies have, if they have a petrol vehicle, there's a petrol vehicle which is a normal aspirated vehicle, and there is a supercharged vehicle. So the complexity of the vehicle is getting more and more. And now since we are combining, we have also the concept of global sourcing. We always thought that we were totally indigenized. So global sourcing. So that sets up the entire back-end process of the supply chain challenge. Coming to the customer-facing side, let's look at from there. Customers' aspirations, customers' requirements, customers' needs, and customers' whims keep changing along with time. That's another challenge statement because it can happen. Second is the regulatory environment. Government comes out with new regulations, some unannounced, some unannounced. And there are also certain changes of increases in fuel prices. We saw the CNG increases dramatic happening. And then we are also talking of other changes which keep happening, the international effects which are there in the international economy. So supply chain challenge, and last but not the least, which Nikunj will be talking of, is all this impacts the dealership and the retail customer. So when we look at an entire thing, let us start, and the first part of the panel, when we talk, just to get us context to it from each of the panelists, we would like to have what are the 3-4 ongoing challenges which impact supply chain as far as auto retailing is concerned. We'll start with you, Tarun. Top 3-4, and then we'll get to the next stage where we'll talk about what needs to be done.
Yeah, frankly speaking, like you said, I have been in the industry for 30 years. Until 3 years back, supply chain was almost taken for granted by us sales and marketing people. It was a well-oiled machinery. We did not know some parts came from Germany or Taiwan. Frankly speaking, I did not know. And the last 3 years was such a big eye-opener that things which we took for granted for so many years had such a crucial role to play. So first thing is COVID or whatever the reason, I think we were all not prepared for it because, like I said, we had always assumed that it would always be perfect. Now coming to the challenges, sir, actually what has happened, I think, is that a couple of things have happened. One is that we all thought that India was an entry-level market. We were always into 699, 799, 999 kind of a Bata kind of a pricing. And it was all about somehow getting the customer there. But what has happened is that this new India, because it evolved, the customer aspiration changed. And today when we see, and if I talk about, say, Hyundai or even industry for that matter, we see it is the top variants which are always in demand. It is the automatics which are in demand. It is the connected cars which are in demand. It is the sunroof which is in demand. It is the Bose stereo system which is in demand. So customer does not want to compromise. On the other hand, the supply chain contrary is that it is those high-end variants, where the semiconductors are an issue. So the problem is looking even more. But what it has also done is that it has really made us very, very agile. So while on one side, there are definitely a lot of challenges, on the other hand, we are also finding ways, how fast we can add new variants, how fast, how clear and communication to the customer. So you talked about the challenge. All these years, we always thought that a customer demand is ripe. We have to just go and retail it. But we never knew that we will be sitting on such back orders. So the biggest challenge was how to communicate to the customer and how to be much more transparent. So I think at the dealer end, our communication with the dealers increased. We had some great training sessions for all the sales staff to make them realize that this situation of supply, shorter than demand is nothing to be proud of. Your collar should not be up. In fact, you have to be very, very humble. You have to be very, very transparent with the customer. And it is a question of setting the right expectation. Because what is a dissatisfaction? Dissatisfaction is expectation minus delivery. So it is not only about improving the delivery, it is also about setting the right expectation. So I think these are some of the things which came up. And all of us have evolved, whether it is, like I said, introducing new variants, then using accessories, as a very potent tool to solve these issues. So many things had to be done, but thankfully, I think we have really moved a long way. And despite such shortages, I think auto industry has really been able to, log in the highest ever retails last year, which means that, yes, to some extent, we have been successful. Yeah, thank you.
Tarun mentioned 2-3 key points. One was the clear point of the global scenario. Nobody knew that the way we are globally connected as far as supply chain is concerned. And then he talked about the customer aspirations, and it would be summed up in a line of Pepsi slogan. I think it was, "Dil mange more." अब तो एक नहीं, सब हजारों अफसानों को पाने का ज़माना है. So that is the sort of scenario which is there. And third is the demands which are, he's saying, oversupply. But only I like to say, since by coincidence we have all people from the four-wheeler franchise or the four-wheeler brands which are there. Nikunj represents one two-wheeler. The position is not the same across other segments even. But having said that, what Tarun talked of is of technology, how you can manage your customer expectation, how can we be more transparent. But let's look at the challenges, and we are not talking at the moment of solutions. Shashank, from your side, what are the challenges you face? And now you have to take the view from a retailer point of view, from the dealer point of view, and from the customer point of view. What are the challenges?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is how to track the changing consumer preferences. And I think and I've been in the industry for 3 decades, I have not seen the preferences of consumers changing so rapidly and so much. So one of the big things that is really required in the industry is how to track and make sense of what the consumer preference is. And it's not a very simple question to answer. Because and we have also to see what are the long-term trends and what are the short-term trends. And we have to have the ability to distinguish between the two basis all the information data that is available. Clearly, we are into what is called the VUCA world, which is like it's more ambiguous, it's more complex, and therefore it's more difficult to track the consumer changing requirements. And some of the things which might be happening today may be short term. It's possible. So I would not conclude that today what is happening is there forever, because it won't be there. It can rapidly change, and that's the lesson which we have learned. And when you talk of from a consumer perspective, yes, consumers would have expected manufacturers to adjust, whether it is an adjustment in terms of demand, whether it is an adjustment of communication, whether it is the strengthening of supply chain. That is something which consumers expect. And we have to be very transparent with them. Like Tarun just mentioned, how it's important to be in communication with customers to explain to them the reason why there is a shortfall of supply, and that if the process is transparent, how much the waiting time is for some models, and why and how the manufacturers are making efforts to reduce those waiting times and explain to the consumers. I think the transparency part is very important from a retail perspective. And of course, we have to, of course, take care of all our dealer friends as well, because they are the people who are the face of with the consumers. They are impacted the most. So while we can, be at the head office or in our offices and talk about it, but actually the dealer faces the consumer every day. And that is why I think information flow is very important. And I think today's technology enables you to be in direct touch with consumers almost on an individual basis. And therefore, that is something which is required to be done if we have to overcome this situation which we are facing today.
So, Shashank talked of three things: customer awareness, aspirations, agility, which is required from the manufacturer, Tarun, from the manufacturer's perspective. And they would assume that the manufacturer would do it. And what Tarun did talk of and what Shashank did talk of is also in terms of transparency. But having said that, the booking thing itself is a mirage. The Hindi mirage is called a Mrik Trishna. You don't know when you approach, does the booking actually go down or go up? Generally, it goes down when the demand, when the production picks up. And it's great to see, Nikunj ki, you have Shashank with you who sympathizes with you, empathizes with you, dealer network. But we'll come to you. Come to Mr. Balbir Singh Dhillon. Balbir, where the segment ends for Tarun, Shashank, and to some extent even Nikunj, your segment starts. We are talking of a segment which is 45, 50 lakh rupees. So it's a different customer, a different dynamics of the market and different concepts of as far as import is concerned. How do you see differently? There will be certain factors which will be common across, but something which is unique when you talk of luxury brands or luxury cars.
Good morning, everyone, first of all. Thank you for having me on the show. I think most of what has been already spoken about is all valid for us as well. It is important to also mention that our dependency on global supply chains is much, much larger than probably the volume segment, because there is a lot of supply chain which is in India. For us, the dependency is very high. And the single most complex thing for us is the predictability. Because our supply chains, when we sit across our dealer partners, or let's say dealer partners sit across a customer to sell a car to them, the first question asked is, when will I get my car? So it is not the question, it is 3 months or 6 months. Even answering that question was the most difficult thing, because we did not know when we will be able to build a particular car. So, this predictability became one of the biggest challenges. The predictability defines network profitability, it defines our profitability. So how can we mitigate this? This was one of the biggest challenges that we faced. Of course, something which is not probably yet got mentioned is the cost escalation. So during this time, we also came across a situation where almost everything went expensive. So metal, to shipment costs, to foreign exchange, all this has taken a hit on eventually on the customer, sometimes also on us. So I think these are two major challenges apart from what has already been spoken about, which is communication to the customers, transparency with the customers, customer expectations, and the changing customer behavior during this time. So I think two most important topics for me is predictability and cost escalation.
In any way, the customer is slightly different, the expectations in some way from the mass brands or mass to premium brands, from your perspective, what do you see?
So to some extent different, to some extent same. If you look at the global automotive luxury players, most of the markets which are developed market, I would say, I'm not saying India is not yet developed, but India
is
is
a developed
very,
market,
very close.
I think.
Yes.
You have to be politically correct. Everything is recorded here. Huh?
Absolutely. So what happens is, like, let's say in Europe, most of the cars are sold on a customer order base. The cars are made after customer has placed the order as per his specifications. India, we mostly are still stock and sell market. You know, so these are the two differentiation which we draw as an industry. But how it impacts is that, you know, during these times, there are multiple things when the supply is in shortage. So let's say headquarters or any manufacturing company also looks at when the volumes go down because of shortages, they also look at which market makes the maximum profits. So, you know, allocations happens accordingly. So, you know, all of this percolates down to all countries and eventually impacts the retail as a whole. But I think at the end of the day, customer, what they look from our side is the most transparent picture. I think that's all I think we have been working around. And when you're honest with the customer, even if you lack something, you know, they will adjust. So that is what we have seen.
So, you know, one word which I'm getting across all the three panelists is the word transparency. That's a common factor. And you say the global impact or the global supply chain dynamics are even more higher or more complex, unlike manufacturers who have a base here or in mass space. And you said the price escalation is very high. Yeah. And sometimes when a vehicle would have been booked and when the vehicle is delivered, customers say, I booked at a certain price. It doesn't become on that part of it, that they are not available for it. Coming to Nikunj, you heard everybody. We are talking of ultimately the moment of truth is when they say the road meets the metal, or the key of the vehicle is handed to the customer, or the cash is taken in, the payment, and the key is handed. From your perspective, what are the top 4 challenges you face? And when I say you face, you represent the voice of the entire dealer community. What I'm hearing is the challenges are key, as Shashank mentioned, it's a very complex thing. You manage something, something goes in control, something goes out of control. I reminding of a Hindi movie, Devanand song, एक पहेली है तू नाग नवेली है तू जितना तुझे बनाओ उतनी उलझती जाए. That is some way sums up the challenges of supply chain. But from your perspective, where you stand?
So thank you, Arun, and thank you, Nabil, for having me. And thanks, Shashank, for empathizing with our community. And I think while I'll agree with Tarun, Shashank, and Balbir on the challenges that are being faced in the present situation, normally I would say we are in the happiest position ever because everything is pre-sold, we have long booking lists, there are no challenges, and we are best. There are no discounts, there are waiting lists, and you're allocating vehicles, you're not selling vehicles. We couldn't have been in a happier situation.
Balance sheet is becoming stronger and stronger.
Yeah, but I think you said there was a common thread which went across the 3 OEMs that you spoke to, and it was about transparency. Now, for us as dealers, I think that probably is the biggest challenge. And why I say the biggest challenge is because last 2 years we've gone through a period where you book your vehicle even before you know what your vehicle is, what the price is, what the variants are, and ultimately what the vehicle will look like or feel like when it comes. So that's when you book your vehicle. You book your vehicle and then you're also tagged. So which means that if I have booked a particular color, variant, seat configuration, fuel, transmission, and those are the kind of configurations which are now available. So it is assumed that I'll stick to that variant, that color, that configuration which I have selected. And the waiting period varies from anywhere from 4 months to probably over 2 years. Yeah, 2 years, it's probably more in some cases. And as a consumer, I am expected to stick to that choice when the vehicle actually comes, which means I don't have an option to change. Now, as a dealer, I think that's the biggest challenge that we face, because I think in this period of 4 months to 24 months, the consumer goes through a number of cycles in terms of his choice, because he has seen the vehicles, he has seen his friends, colleagues use those vehicles, And he has seen those colors which looked different when they were on the TV or on the brochures or the e-brochures that we are now sending out, and when the car actually comes. And he obviously says that when I'm paying this kind of money, I should have a choice of buying the vehicle I really want. Yeah, theek hai, I opted for this, but that's not what I really want. And I say, sorry, you booked this vehicle, this is the only vehicle I can offer you. If you want to change your mind, your waiting period goes back to 24 months. I don't know how happy or sad I'll feel as a consumer. And as a dealer, I really wouldn't know how to handle those emotions of those customers, because somebody who has waited for that long a period and he decides to change his variant, can he or can he not? So I think as an industry, and I'm talking of both OEMs and dealers, we will need to somehow see that are we doing the right thing about creating the kind of booking hype that we have.
That we'll discuss in the next half what we need to do.
Okay. So I think this is a huge challenge. The second challenge, of course, when you talked of predictability, is predictability of when the vehicle is going to get delivered. I think almost all OEMs have a system where they'll tell you that this is the expected time of delivery. And then the challenges happen because some semiconductor is not available or some component is not available, and that expected time of delivery changes. And for a customer who's waited for a year or 16 months, if I tell him, sorry, it was expected this week, but unfortunately it's got postponed to the next 6 weeks. How do you handle that customer? He will never believe that you have been transparent. And he will never believe the challenges which both the OEM and the dealer is facing in being able to fulfill the demand of the customer. I think these are the kind of challenges that we are facing, and these are increasing by the day with the number of variants, the number of options, the number of configurations, the number of colors which are now available to a consumer to choose from.
So clearly it's not easy. I mean, although the balance sheets may be getting stronger day by day, but the worry and the emotional connect with the customers is a challenge, and you're talking of that commitment given to customers. But I'm just taking, Nikunj, another point. Here we're talking of only customers, the dates getting postponed. But it can happen when the production rises and the market goes down. It can get also accelerated. What is the scenario in that at that point of time?
So I think we have gone through that cycle when the production goes up and the inventory goes up, and so it's not so much of a waiting cycle for the customer, it is a waiting cycle for the dealer, for the customer to come in. And I think we have faced that situation far more than the present situation that we are facing. And probably, I mean, in terms of our preparedness, we are more prepared to handle that situation than the situation or the Ethiopia that we are living in right now.
So you're saying that situation is a better situation?
Definitely not. This is a better situation.
That's what I was surprised. You said we are waiting for that. Tarun, now from your point of view, you know, it's very easy to say from the customer point of view, but you also do represent the entire ecosystem of production supply chain, which is behind you. I mean, you are the face as far as concerned. From their perspective, and we need to improve on this. And it can be both scenarios. Today we are talking about a scenario when there is long waiting or customer changing preference, but there could be another scenario when you produce based on the customer's booking, but when the time of delivery comes, the customer backs out or he's done multiple bookings. So from a supply chain angle or production angle, and these are long lead times. It's not so easy. You can't switch on and off. What do you think are the challenges? What needs to be done?
So I think you have raised a very, very relevant topic. And I think the communication between sales, marketing, production, and supply chain has to be very, very strong. Also, I think our own analytics has to be much better. When I say this, what I mean is that probably about 7-8 years back, we used to say, okay, inquiries are hot, warm, and cold. Today, we have started doing this for bookings. Hot, warm, and cold. Which are the bookings which can really materialize? Nikunj raised a very important point. So I think, it is about your own analysis of, okay, what's going to happen, how many of these customers are going to take the vehicle, because you are in a much better position than production or supply chain as sales and marketing. So you need to really be, proactive and much more analytical. That is one part of it. The second part of it is where I slightly have a different viewpoint than Nikunj is that Suppose I tell the customer today that it's a 5-month waiting. If you go after 5 months and say, oh, I need 2 more months, it's a catastrophe. So what we have made a system is that every month you need to be communicating with the customer. Okay, sir, your waiting was, you were 100 on the list. Now you're 80 on the list. Now you're 60 on the list. I think it is all about developing that kind of trust. Because like I said, it is the trust, how much the customer trusts you, which decides. Yes, nobody will like to fail on their commitment. So one is you'll keep a buffer to take, because by now you know that there are uncertainties which will suddenly come because of logistics also. Not only because of the material, but logistics also. So you need to keep a buffer. And second thing is, frequency of communication also has to really go up. And the whole training is all about not running away from the customer. I think that is very, very important. That एक time था ना booking हो गई चलो यार अब अगला customer ढूंढते हैं. No, I think it's very, very important to nurture that relationship and make sure that build that trust. I think then it becomes much, much easier. I know it is not easy, much, much easier. And then you must empathize with the dealers. Like my team will be ready to talk to the customer that yes, this is, sometimes what happens is customer will say, no, what you are saying is not right, but the moment OEM steps in, I think that trust comes in even more. So I think we also have to really take that ownership. All these years we were only depending on the dealers to resolve it, but our field teams are now much more willing to take it. So to answer your question, from supply chain point of view, much better analytics to give them a clear picture, to do a much better analysis of bookings, because nobody will want that suddenly the production comes and you say, oh, I can't sell. So how to really have systems to booking to retail. So I think booking to retail has become a very, very important aspect of the whole thing, and to monitor the progress and make sure that you don't end up with too much of a free stock. I think all these things really will help you to have a smooth sailing as and when the supply situation eases out. Yeah.
So Tarun, you're saying continuous. It's like you have to be, every ball you have to focus on. And you keep on communicating the customer on a regular basis. And you talk of strong analytics. Now, Shashank, one question I'm taking from Tarun. Strong analytics is all right. Strong analytics depends on mathematics. But if they are dual booking, double booking, speculative booking, dealer booking, booking in the hope when the vehicle comes back out, where does analytics play a role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's not just analytics that we have to look at. Looking purely at data without seeing the basis of the data might lead you in a different and a wrong direction. And therefore, and in any case, even if the data was correct, it's possible that data will change. For example, very recently, CNG bookings had a huge numbers and the projections were quite high. But suddenly you saw the CNG prices going up. And that was because of a geopolitical situation, which nobody could have anticipated. So even if the data suggested that CNG was such a great buy in terms of the cost of ownership, but if something happens in somewhere in the globe, unless we have a direct line with all the major superpowers and what they are going to do, or which way the missiles...
They also are not aware of what's going to happen.
Yeah, which way the missiles will go up, but we don't know that. So one is, I think the world, we said, is VUCA, and we are even talking of the effect of that on organization is what is the acronym. You said intellectual, so let me introduce that. That word is BANI, which is that this is the effect on organization. They will be brittle, anxious, it is incomprehensible, and it's non-linear. Therefore, the analytics may not help. So what is going to happen is we need to have the agility and the flexibility. And while it's easy, and I think I completely agree with Tarun and also with Nikunj, we always talk of 4 T's: training, trust, truth, transparency. This is a common discussion which we can have. I remember having this discussion a decade back, and if I'm around next decade also, I will be definitely talking about these 4 things. But what has happened is something which is unexpected, and it's happening on a global scale. The scale and the rapidity with which changes are happening is incomprehensible. We need to have the resilience built to incorporate and accept those changes, which means we have to be more resilient, we have to be more flexible, and we have to be more agile in terms of our that was never thought of earlier. People used to say, give a forecast, and I will build my production and supply chain systems. But no longer is that case. We are talking about keep failing, but then try to go ahead, learn fast, keep going ahead. And that is what I think is the direction which needs to be taken by the industry, and they are taking it. Nobody could have predicted, for example, that there would be such a drastic change in demand for washing machines and so on, which is ultimately resulting in this. COVID was never predicted, for example. मैंने तो नहीं सोचा था कि मैं कभी बर्तन भी धोऊंगा और मैं सब्जी भी काटूंगा, बट किया था ना हमने. तो आई वॉज द फर्स्ट पर्सन टू से कि भाई डिश वॉशर तो ले ही लो, कम से कम मेरा एक काम तो बचेगा, सब्जी काटने का काम तो अभी नहीं हो पाया है ऑटोमेट, बट दैट कुड ऑल्सो हैपन. सो वी हैव टू बी मोर एजाइल एंड फ्लेक्सिबल, एंड दैट इज समथिंग विच वी आर वर्किंग ऑन. It is possible that you could have systems, both supply chain and production, where you can build in that factor of agility and flexibility, without which it is simply not possible, is what I can say, because the scale and the speed and the rapidity and the extent and the incomprehensible changes which are happening will keep on happening.
Just one question, and Tarun, I'll come to you. We are talking of changes which are external, but there's a lot of changes which the government policies are having. And some of these are regulatory norms, new things coming in. Do you think there has to be some system? I mean, we have a very illustrious gentleman, Mr. I.V. Rao, sitting here. He was here. Where is Ivy? Yeah, Ivy is right here. So Ivy knows what the way the government works and the industry interface. So how does it, what can the role the government play? Because government also wants to support industry. Because otherwise they'll make your life is becoming more complex. Another variable is getting added.
So, sir, frankly speaking, regulatory norms have always been there. The only thing is...
But the speed of regulatory norms, the number of norms.
Yes, of course. So, as OEMs, I think we need to be much more proactive. I'll give you an example. Like, suppose this RD2 we are talking about now. So, it comes from 1st April. But as an OEM, we decided that 31st January, the production will be over. So I think we need to build those buffers because the market, like Shashank said, there is so much of unpredictability. So we cannot say, okay, probably on 30th of March, I'll change. So you need to build in those buffers because frankly, this is not in the hand of the dealer. This is frankly totally an OEM call. But sometimes we also get carried away. We'll feel, okay, price will go up. Maybe let me try to sell more. So I think we need to really have a slightly more mature view in terms of what are the pitfalls, if you fail to clear a stocks. Even if it is on production or retail, that's another issue. But my point is that, and we need to take those calls because sometimes there is uncertainty. So because, okay, maybe we have a representation, what will happen or not happen. But my point is, this is something a go or a no-go. So it's better because regulations generally are either very good for the environment or very good for the customer from a safety perspective. So as we already said, as long as today customer is not willing to compromise, so if you are able to really build in that kind of a value with the regulation, then I think you can really sell it. So it's all about building those buffers and trying and to do it to err on that side rather than err on this side has been our approach.
So what Tarun is talking of building scenarios and more than that building buffers. We talked of, when we did engineering, we used to say, what is the factor of safety you build into your bridges and roads? Do we build the factor of safety? But I believe the external factors, and they are international factors, and because you have companies which are supplying across 100 countries, India is still not the biggest luxury car market. So, and it's not the most prioritized market. And India probably customers are more fickle, what I understand from people. So what is your expectation or what is your advice? What should be done to manage this better?
So I think in general it's a two-way. One is what we need to do and what we expect. Let's say the regulation, the regulatory authorities is a stable policy regime because, especially for us, for example, in the luxury space, our planning cycles are very, very long. Let's say if we have to invest, we need to know what will happen next 5 to 10 years. So our planning cycles are such long to get more investments from headquarters. So that is something which we always expect if the policy regime is stable. That really helps us to build a strong base on which we can go back to our headquarters saying that we need this investment and this change is required. So that is on the external side. On the internal side, of course, we always build these buffers. but they don't really work all the time. Sometimes we are on this side, sometimes we are in a situation where it is a shortage, and sometimes we are in a situation where it is excess. And this creates a problem on our day-to-day running, because the moment you are in any of these situations, either you end up losing or you end up pushing too much, which leads to a negative impact on the profitability. And at the end of the whole supply chain, from where we get all our material to eventually our dealer partners, this the profitability, the sustainability needs to be maintained. So this is something which is definitely a challenge, especially for the luxury segment that I represent. So I think stable policy regime and some buffer which we can build really help us.
Coming to Nikunj, looking from a dealer perspective, he has to manage his funds, he has to manage his inventory, he has to manage customer expectations, and he has to keep the boat continuing. And when there is, and this is a reality of the market, even when there are shortages, there are certain models and variants which are available ex stock or easily available. So obviously manufacturers will push those vehicles to you. We'll get the other one, take this, and you will try to push to the customer. Now from this perspective, when you have this entire thing on working capital management and stock management and even getting the right model variant point of time, what do you see what are the steps you would advise manufacturers to do? Or what are things which could be done both by the dealer and the manufacturer?
So I think there are multiple things that manufacturers need to do. So I think more than the dealers, manufacturers are in a position to really know that these are the kind of variants and colors and models which are in short supply, and these are the kind of models and variants which are easily available off the shelf and which are the ones which would create inventory. And if they do create inventory, I think that's where the entire problem of working capital management happens, and specifically in times where the interest rates are continuously going up and adding woes to the working capital management of the dealership. What is also becoming more complex is how financial institutions are now focusing on the health of the dealership in terms of how working capital is managed, how inventory is managed, and how. So I think almost all OEMs after the new GST regime came in switched to plant billing. And so obviously once the vehicles get dispatched to a dealer from a plant, it's the dealer inventory. Now, can we look at a mixed model of inventory management where vehicles which are in shortage, colors, variants, I think those are the ones which are directly billed to the dealer and an inventory is created at the dealership. But can we also look at regional stockyards being created for models which are easily available and
but
which
we
are
had got out of the stockyards. Stockyards used to be very prevalent.
So I am saying, can we now, because of the change situation, can we relook at that model where there is a pool of vehicles available, which are easily available, which would not add to the dealer inventory and keep the working capital management far more flexible than what it is. I know I'm thinking out of the box, but this is, since you asked a working capital question, I'm giving you a solution which I think is very, very workable and which would actually reduce the cost not just at the dealership but hugely at the manufacturer level also, because ultimately inventories directly or indirectly impact the manufacturer too. But I think there are larger questions than just working capital which needs to be managed, and I think all of us are talking of agility, all of us are talking about being nimble-footed, all of us are talking about flexibility in our operations to suit how the market is changing and specifically at the rapid pace at which the market is changing. And we are also agreeing that there is a lot of unpredictability in the entire market, and that's how the market is going to function going forward. So it's not just today's problem. I think this problem is now perennial. Change is perennial, and the speed of change is going to be much faster than what it is at times because of regulation, at times because of geopolitical situations, and at times because of changing customer demands. So I think when we start creating a dealership, are we creating a model which is flexible? Are we creating a model which could be modified looking at what the market is saying? It's easier said than done, but I am sure there are ways of doing it. And I think if we start looking at those models, probably when the demand is there, when the requirement is there, I'm able to do an XYZ of things in terms of creating an infrastructure so that the customer experience continues to remain at the top, because I think the entire industry is now focusing on customer experience, the purchase experience at the dealership. And when the chips are down, can I do something where without hurting the customer experience, the purchase experience, I am able to manage my costs? So I think those are the kind of out-of-the-box thinking that manufacturers and dealers need to sit together and do without damaging the customer experience, because I think that's paramount. Customer centricity is paramount.
So customer centricity, customers' emotions are paramount. And you want to retain the customers because it's a high value product purchase and you want to do it. Tarun, you have in the early part of your career, you were very closely involved in logistics. And we are talking of things going back. I mean, Nikunj said it's not that he's recommending it totally, but he says, can we have depots or stockyards which are closer on certain models? But the other way is the way road transportation has improved and connectivity today doesn't, from whichever part of the country your vehicles are dispatched, you can reach in 3-4 days. So what's your view on that?
So to answer his question, we have stockyards. Not a single vehicle has been dispatched to this stockyard in the last 2 years. Because there is so much a shortage of vehicles that dealers are saying, why do you need to send the vehicles to the stockyard?
Are you closing the stockyards?
All of them are empty.
Are you using them from alternative rental model or something?
Nothing. In fact, what we did was, because insurance, then we had to change based on the actual stock. Otherwise, there's so much of cost. So last 2 years, stockyards are there, but nothing, not a single car there. So we are very much ready with the stockyard, because we thought that going forward, this hybrid model will be very good. But no need so far. I hope it continues and we don't have that need.
So are you foregoing your stockyards? Are you renewing the agreements of the lease or no?
Sir, these are long-term decisions.
So you're keeping that.
Maybe, I mean, on the lighter side, Tarun, maybe those smaller stockyards are happening at dealerships, which you are not dispatching.
With zero stocks.
So there's a loaded comment, so you're transferring your stocks there. So these are the real stockyards and they are paid stocks.
But actually, frankly speaking, dealers are saying, don't send to stockyard, send to me, because
but-
there's such a big queue of the customers.
But this is a market scenario, it
This is
might
not
change.
going to continue. So we have to be prepared, and I agree with him that going forward, probably stockyards will play an important role, because customers will want a faster delivery, and you will need some pool at the stockyard so that you can maybe give the vehicle delivery in 2 days or something like that. So we are prepared. And in case the market scenario changes, we are very much prepared.
I'm so happy.
Coming to Shashank, we have talked of the stockyards. The problem statement up till now has been that we are unable to produce the right model mix variant in the shortest possible time to give to customers. Even if you have stockyards, it will reduce the time by 2-3 days, but the bigger problem is somewhere else. So what's your view on this entire concept of stockyards? Or you think there's another approach we need to follow?
Stockyard approach, actually, I have a little bit of a difference with what Nikunj said. Stockyard, not that stockyard is not a good concept, it is a good concept. Maruti Suzuki also has stockyards. We have, in fact, we are opening new stockyards. Because
are you utilizing the stockyards or they're vacant?
Yes, I am coming to that.
Or they're like flat cricket pitches? Huh?
Yeah. Sir, they are definitely not turning tracks. And we have enough spin bowlers and pace bowlers also. So track doesn't really matter. So whatever be the situation, we have to prepare for it. Okay. So if today the situation is stockyards are maybe underutilized, it doesn't mean that this trend has been there it will be there forever. But we have to prepare for it. My basic thing is that it is not really out of the box, as Sanghi Sahab is congratulating himself. It is not.
He didn't congratulate himself. He says he's thinking aloud. So you're putting words in his mouth.
No, he said out of the box.
No,
but
I have a reason for that.
Okay.
I have a background.
Okay. But to my mind, there are some models where definitely even today we are utilizing the stockyards, and they don't cut the transit time, the stock holding time by a couple of days. They do it by much more. For example, in Trivandrum, where the transit time itself was 7-8 days, it's now, because we have a stockyard in Bangalore, it's about 2-3 days. So it does help. And it also helps the customer, because customer, for specific variants and models, need not now wait for that longish period. So in that sense, it's a good concept, and we continue to utilize it. But I'm also a little, not bothered, but actually
Concerned.
Not concerned. I'm happy actually if others are not thinking about it, but I'm concerned for our own organization, which is that we are talking in a really in the box thinking about transit times, about products, about variants, and production. Actually, consumers, there is a big trend emerging where it is going beyond product. It is about mobility. And mobility as a service is a very talked about thing now. It's getting bigger. The revenue pools and the profit pools in the service sector is getting bigger and bigger. And you could see going forward, for example, ownership patterns being different. Fractional.
But does it affect the demand pattern in sense?
Yeah, yeah, of
It
course.
will, it will. It has not impacted yet.
Absolutely, absolutely. For example, you may have multimodal transportation, which is satisfying those mobility needs. The vehicle's pattern will change. The fractional ownership will change that also. So, subscription, for example, is a fractional part of fractional ownership. You could see P2P or carpooling or car on demand or driver on demand or large fleet management systems, which we are not talking about. Those are also factors which will affect the demand and the industry overall. And talking about that working capital, which Sanghi Saab mentioned, yes, I think it is very important that manufacturers should be really concerned about this cost to the dealership. The dealership costs have got three biggest elements. One is manpower, which is the largest, rentals and inventory. So manpower cost, maybe it's difficult because it's to reduce because there's a market this thing, but manufacturers can do a lot to help dealers manage the inventory part. And dealers also need to do a lot to see that they don't offer or fritter away those savings in discounting. So that is something which obviously legally we cannot intervene in, but this side about inventory management, either through stockyard, through better order planning, and you talk about stockyard for vehicles, but there are stockyards for, there are warehouses for parts and accessories.
Okay.
Those are also very important. We need to look at dealers and collaborate with them so that this particular element of cost comes down drastically. Interest rates going up, even if interest rates were low, you will still have to, this will still be a large element of their total cost. Yeah. We need to help the dealers in their profitability. That's something which I'm very strongly in favor of manufacturers looking into it and doing everything to bring down the inventory cost of the dealership.
Great words, Shashank. So a lot of things from the market and from the customer. Coming to Mr. Dhillon, we talked about stockyards, but there's a new model which is emerging in luxury cars where we're saying that why have stockyards? Why even send to dealers? Why don't you build directly from the factory? Because the units are small and they're high value products. Is that the trend which will become a national trend or is it early days?
So I would say it is a bit early days, but it's a very positive trend that is happening. And what we've also done in last, let's say 2-3 years, when there was a squeeze in supply, we've also used this opportunity to actually reduce our dealer stocking norms. So normally, let's say dealers would holding 45 days of stock. We've kind of reduced to 15 days. So the intention was that on one side, the cost is coming down. On the other side, when we build the stock at our end, then customer gets a wider choice. So initially, when I mentioned, we are a stock and sell market, how it used to be that a customer goes to a dealership and he picks up whatever is available at the dealership. Now, we are exposing our own inventory to the end customer so that he's got.
Is this being done by Tarun and by exposing your inventory actively to the, although you may say you don't have much inventory, but is it something in the realm of reality?
Yeah, not the numbers, but yes, what is available and what is not available very clearly.
You are giving numbers or you're giving quantities also?
So everything. So the transparency is end to end. What variant you want. What colors, what interiors, what variants within a particular model. So everything is exposed via our dealer partners to the customers, so that they know they must have a bigger, larger pool to choose from. The other advantage, let's say in our segment, is that most of our customers, the luxury cars, when they buy, that's not their first car. So, what we've also seen that customers are willing to wait. At least this has changed in the past. We are not getting really a customer who's just coming to the showroom saying that I need this car now. So they're also willing to wait. They understand that they have a much wider choice, but it takes a bit of a time, 1 week to 10 days. So I think in general, in luxury space, that flexibility we have.
So flexibility you have and you're giving much more transparency.
Yeah.
Now we come to the last round and this is a rapid fire round. The question will be different from each panelist can be. So please put your thinking caps. I don't get you any problem. I'm seeing some people putting their, what they'll ask. Rapid fire. So we'll start with you, Shashank. We'll come to Tarun later. My question to you is, and this is to be in bullet points, 2 things which, if you have to manage supply chain better from the dealer point of view or from the customer point of view, 2 things manufacturers should stop doing and 2 things dealers should start doing. So 2 things manufacturers should stop doing and 2 things which dealers should start doing.
So
I hope the question is clear.
Yeah, so I note that you have said what manufacturer should stop and what dealer should do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first thing I think manufacturer should stop doing is to produce excess than what is clearly the demand. That is one thing which manufacturer should stop doing. Second, what manufacturer should also stop doing is forcing dealers to keep a higher inventory than what is really required. 2 things very clearly manufacturers should stop doing. Of course, there are many things which manufacturers can stop doing, but since your rapid fire is only 2, so what dealers should do is that, one, they should try to give a feedback to the manufacturer about what they really believe is the actual demand. Not leave it to bookings and because there are problems, etc. And also they should feel free to give their opinions, something which I find often dealers is missing, and that creates a lot of... And second thing which I think dealers should start doing is to realize that the selling of products, of cars, is not just the lower funnel marketing activity. There is an inverted funnel beyond the sale, and that is customer retention, customer advocacy, and customer recommendation. They have to be very careful of what they need to do to appeal to this inverted funnel.
Okay, Tarun, coming to you, slightly reverse the question. What dealers should stop doing, which is a practice which is not the right practice, and what manufacturers should start doing?
So manufacturers should start doing, I think we have learned a lot in the last 2 years, that how we can really work on very efficient systems, like MOS, traditionally 1.3 MOS or 1.5 MOS, no. I think all of us have realized that probably 0.6, 0.7 or whatever. My point is, let's not go back to those old habits and continue these good habits even when things change. So I think this is very important. So please continue to do what you are doing, what you have been doing in the last. The second thing is to take more ownership, like I said, because more and more the customers are requiring, manufacturers' empathy in this kind of an uncertain scenario. So I think that is something which we will have to raise our hand and train our field people to take that ownership, not really run away from the customer and take that ownership. From a dealer's perspective, what they should stop doing, very clearly, I think that trust which the customers, they should have to make sure that anything because of whatever pressures and all, they should follow some kind of strict seniority in these times, because this is very important. So while there will be pressures, but I think they have to really follow seniority so that I believe that customers, if they know that it is transparent, 90% of the problem is solved. They have only a problem that somebody who booked with me has got the car, whereas I have not got the car. And number 2, I think dealers should have patience. The moment there is a little bit of a demand, they come to manufacturer and say, oh, please put up a plant, please do this, please. And then after 1 month, oh, I can't sell. So I think you need to, because we value our suggestions, so it has to be much more mature, not based on the last 7 days of sales or not based on last 7 days. I think you have to be much more mature.
Recency factor should not be the criteria.
Yes. Like Shashank gave a very good example of CNG, and there are innumerable examples. Okay. So, yeah.
So I'll twist the question slightly, Mr. Dhillon. Slightly more difficult. I don't know, difficult or easier question for you. What are two things which government should do and two things government should not do to promote better supply chain? And you say government, it'll be state government, central government, industrial policy, everything. Two things they should do and two things they should stop doing.
It's a very, very difficult question because
See,
you
I
have to be
think of my questions half a minute before, so I don't know
politically-
myself what question I'm going to ask.
you have to be politically correct in answering this
Okay,
question.
you can answer what the government should do if you don't want to say what they should stop doing.
So I think I already mentioned, I think a stable policy regime is the most critical, and I speak primarily from the luxury space because we need predictability for 3 to 5 years at least, if not more, so that we can plan our long-term vision. And that in our own planning cycles, it takes a lot of time. So I think this is the most important topic. I think there's another topic which we have been speaking as an industry for a long time is perhaps if we can, government has done wonderful thing by bringing in GST, so the prices of the cars are same across the country. I think the last thing that remains is registration costs. If they're also made same across the country, I think that will also bring a lot of transparency for the customers, and that should help.
So, Balbir has said the points well, but he said it in such a nice manner, I would recommend him for the Indian Foreign Service.
Thank you.
Nikunj, now coming to you last. 2 bad habits which the dealer should give up. And 2 things which support you require from manufacturers which will help this entire thing. So 2 bad habits, I won't say bad habit is a strong word, but 2 practices they should give up.
So,
And Nabil, don't record this point because he's answerable to thousands of dealers.
no, but it's perfectly all right. You can record everything that you want to. So, because I think if it's about the ecosystem, it's about the entire retail ecosystem. So I think what the dealers should stop doing, and I will not call it a habit, is overcommitting.
Overcommitting.
And I think a number of times, because of pressures, either of the market or from the OEMs, we end up overcommitting and we don't live up to that commitment. And I think that's the worst thing that a dealer could do in terms of earning the customer trust. So that's one thing that they should definitely desist from doing. 2, not change their policies depending upon what the market is. So I become arrogant in terms of a seller if there is a shortage situation, and I get into deep discounting when the market is. So I think I'll need to be far more stable in my policies with my customers, which means I need to be very even, irrespective of what the demand situation is. And believe me, it creates a wonderful customer connect if you have this even policy, irrespective of what the market situation is. So these are the 2 things which the dealer should
So स्थिरता और
definitely stop.
समन्वय हिंदी में कहते हैं वो रहना चाहिए dealers पे. Okay, now 2 things which you support you required from, and pick it bullet points only. What
Yeah.
is 2 things if manufacturers did this, it'll help a lot.
So I think one principal thing that, and current market situation specifically in terms of the theme that we are talking about, is creating this booking hype. And I think offline also I have been discussing about it. The booking needs to be far more realistic than what it is. I think every manufacturer is now focusing on the headline it creates when a new model is launched.
So this is a message you're giving to both the gentlemen or
For
left
the,
and
to
right?
the entire industry, not just to both the gentlemen sitting here,
Okay.
to the entire industry, including my own OEM. So it is to, the industry is not to create that booking hype.
Overhype.
Yeah, so it have a very realistic demand.
Okay,
It will
that's
help you, it will help the manufacturer, and I think it will, above help, it will help the customer, because then the customer actually really knows what is the right time he is going to get his vehicle.
Yeah.
And finally, of course, I think to an extent there might be disagreement, is to create intra-dealer competition. I think that impacts the entire industry much more than what it impacts when brand competition happens.
Okay.
Is prevent that, and I'm sure, so while it's a very debatable point, but there are policies which encourage intra-dealer competition. I think that needs to.
So you say you should create intra-dealer competition.
Should not
create it. Sorry, intra-dealer competition, which is there. So, we are coming to it, and before we conclude, we'll take 2-3 questions from the audience. Please keep your question to half a minute because we are running out of time, and we'll ask any panelist to answer 1 minute. Yes, the lady there. You can ask a question. Just keep it short and precise.
Based on the discussion which we had, so would the dealer be looking at car subscription, charging stations, or scrapping the car as an alternate source of revenues over really selling the cars? Thank you.
So, Tarun, you can take a bullet point, then I'll ask Shashank to also
So I
answer
think
this
going
question.
forward, the business model will change. Shashank briefly mentioned about mobility as a service. So yes, I think we're all preparing for that. And yes, globally, things have already started changing. COVID brought us a little bit back, I would say, because shared mobility and all took a backseat. But I think in the long run, yes, the models will change and all of us will have to evolve. But it will not happen in a day. So I don't think today you can say, okay, tomorrow everything will move to mobility. So all of us have to slowly nurture and be ready for that transition.
Yeah, Shashank, anything short to respond to that?
Yes, I think they should get into those revenue sources because the profit pool, revenue pool will come from such services. And in any case, customer requires that. And in Maruti Suzuki, when we say we want to give joy of mobility to all Indians, it's clear to us that we have to build the house of mobility first.
One more question, the last question, because we're running out of time. Who would like to ask the last question? Or we'll wrap it up now? I think we'll wrap it out because I already got a signal that your time is up. Otherwise, the gatekeepers, other people will come and push us out from the stage. I think it's been a very insightful discussion, and I would like to thank all the panelists for being very free, frank, fearless, insightful, and innovative. Huh? Oh, sorry. Huh? He was not here. He was not fearless. Okay, that's your interpretation. But I think the point which is coming across is that supply chain challenges is not a question of only in a seller's market. Every market scenario, there will be supply chain challenges, and you need to be more proactive, more agile, more collaborative, and the dealer and the manufacturer have to work much more closely to ensure this happens. It's not a perfect thing that we will not reach a perfect solution, but if we are aware of the basic principles, we are aware of the pitfalls, we are aware of what we can do, and we do it in the right manner, and we have a collaborative approach, the supply chain challenges, which looms large, at least we would have mitigated the problems and ensured a better customer experience and ultimately customer delight and ultimately better sales. Thank you very much. Thank you all the panelists.